And thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. I'm a politician, so I like to talk about myself a lot, but I'm more interested in digging in on people's questions and learning more. I guess I should start with, a little bit about who I am and how I got here and sort of where I want to, see the world. So I was born in 1985. I was born deaf, developed a speech impediment. My biological mom was addicted to drugs and alcohol. I was forced into adoption, and I was adopted by a civil rights lawyer for a father and a social worker for a mom. I wasn't fully able really to hear until I was about 8 and fully able to speak, until I was 12. And much of my life, I sort of was told that, why did my parents adopt me? What was I was too much of a mess, often put into isolated situations. But the reason why I could get through anything was I really had a strong community. I had a good school, good friends. I had neighbors who had their doors open in times of need. And so for much of life, as I was figuring out myself, I wasn't having to do that on my own. I had other people I can lean on. And that ended up going to school in Kansas randomly. It's a longer story for another day. And in Kansas, I sort of started figuring out who I am, what it meant to be Robert Peters, and sort of my voice and, how I place in the world. And I get out and it's in the midst of the Great Recession and I couldn't find a job. So I interned for, at the time, Alderman Toni Preckwinkle. She was running for Cook County Board President. I interned on her campaign. This is back when it was really, really normal not to pay your interns. I'm glad we live in a different world now on much of this, because political work can be like 60 hours and grinding it out. And for what seems like no real return. But I did that. And, during that same time, my adopted father got cancer. And during that same time, my adopted mother, who for years struggled with alcoholism and mental health issues and was sort of self-medicating, became more and more isolated. And I went from working campaign to campaign. I would go down to New Orleans and I worked on campaign, or I worked up in the North Shore of Chicago, not really feeling too fulfilled. I didn't feel like it was rooted in who I am as a person. And all of a sudden then my dad passes away from cancer. I start grieving. I read more Camus than a 17-year-old French kid. I am in an existential pit, and I try to leave politics. So I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to just do politics because other people told me that's what I'm supposed to do. And I went to go work at Groupon, was sort of nihilistic in my life, just wanted to just live and just do my own thing. And while at Groupon, there was a few things that I sort of learned about myself and about the world. It was 3,000 of us, generally all millennials, having all been promised in the 90s that we won the Cold War and our lives are going to be great, both getting terrible pay, horrible hours, getting calls from people who had lost their jobs during the Great Recession, and now are relying on Groupon to make the money they need, that it's not going to make the return that they need for their life to live. So that was all happening at the same time. George Zimmerman got off for the murder of Trayvon Martin. And then my adopted mom basically drank herself to death for $300,000 of debt. So I left Groupon, went back into politics and organizing. And I went, I was at Chicago Votes, which is an organization that works on youth voter turnout and criminal justice reform issues. I worked on some campaigns, particularly with aldermen, with the intention of helping Kim Foxx run for state's attorney and create the conditions for Kim Foxx to get broad support in her first run. And I left that, sort of that to go into organizing, direct organizing. So I organized with Reclaim Chicago and the People's Lobby. I did my first 2 acts of civil disobedience, which was one of the more wild things that I never thought I would ever do that in my life, but putting my body on the line and having 3 cops have to carry this 6'2", 200-pound body into a truck. That was a risk that I felt like I needed to take, particularly around the budget cuts and the fact that we had not seen an increase in minimum wage. I helped start the End Money Bond Coalition because the way that we use bail is that you're guilty of being poor and black and brown and not of any crime. So to abolish cash bail and help start that coalition. And I worked on campaigns that were rooted in who I am as a person. And all of a sudden, after working on a governor's race, there was this opening to become a state senator. And I decided to go for the appointment. I get the appointment. It was a dramatic appointment. Some business interest folks were not very excited to have me in the seat. Immediately, I get hit with imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong in this space? Am I supposed to be here? You know, I'm supposed to be this outsider. And I said, okay, well, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to work on from who I am as a person, my core, and tie it so that there's community organizations doing the work. So, you know, I passed 13 bills, mostly rooted in DCFS and our youth in care, the criminal justice system, and economic issues, because those three things profoundly shape who I am. Being adopted means I'm the cousin of our youth in care, but that is tied to who I am. The criminal justice system. My biological mom was addicted to drugs in the 80s. I was born in a community hospital that now is a luxury condo and apartment. The place that is listed on my birth certificate for the address is now high-end apartments that she would have never been able to afford. And so when I think about it, my birth and my existence is rooted to our mass incarceration, tough on crime policies. And then my dad argued in front of the Supreme Court against illegal searches and seizures. And so my hero and my dad also worked on these issues, and I found these things came together. And then lastly, on the economic issues and the economic front that we are definitely feeling right now in 2020, all of these things are all sort of three triple crises coming together at the same time. The Great Recession ultimately led me to becoming a state senator. A lot of things happened that led me to become a state senator, but the fact that I came out of college without a job that led me down this path. And so as much I'm grateful to be a state senator, the situations and the conditions that led me here are absolutely disgusting. And so I think about the work that I'm doing as a state senator ultimately deeply comes down to the fact that we need to reimagine what community looks like in the 21st century. Someone like me should have never had to be put up for adoption. My biological mom should have had all the resources and love and care to deal with her trauma and her pain. We shouldn't have it so that more and more people feel like they have to raise a kid on their own and not be able to lean on that sense of community. And we have a system of huge disinvestment that has come out, particularly Black working class communities, combined with high levels of policing and incarceration, instead of dealing with the pain, the trauma, and the material struggle that people are going through. And that in 2020, that these triple crises are showing us not anything new, but things that have long existed, and that we must come out of 2020 building this new world that reimagines that community, that reimagines what it means to have safety, what it means to have dignity, and what it means to have justice. So I'm excited to be here. I think this is an opportunity for us all to work to get that done and to use 2020 as a springboard in our fight against authoritarianism and systems of oppression to a freer and better world. So thank you all for having me, and I'm excited to dig in.
Thank you, Senator Peters. I have a lot to say, a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to invite Dr. Lockhart to respond first.
Absolutely. So I know we're going to actually get into dialogue because I literally wrote down so many questions as well. But I know well, first, I don't have a large political background. Let's just make that clear here. But I am an educator. And there are times where education is political. There are times where, you know, how we educate, where is from the church to the classroom, everything we do, what we have on the walls, how we have, you know, the program, every single thing we do teaches, and it says something to those who come and sit, to those who come and seek care. And I think it's important because I'm just thinking about, you know, when he's talking about this strong community and reimagining community, one of my big areas is around, you know, play and embodiment for ministry and for moving forward. And I'm just thinking about, you know, how do we cultivate these communities where we aren't just, you know, surviving, but we're thriving, we're flourishing, and we can actually live into our wholeness, our full embodied wholeness, right? Because for me, that's also an act of justice. That's also a beautiful place that we can actually live into, where we're walking in this wholeness, where we're able to model that if many of us are in ministry, or if we're, you know, civic leaders or whatever we're doing, but we're realizing that, you know, it's not sustainable to work all day, every day, to bring work home, especially, again, as we talk about this triple crises, as we talk about things that are going on, that is not going to sustain us if we're going to continue to be leaders, if we're going to continue to push and recreate. We can't do that when we're on E. So we have to make sure that we're stopping, that we're taking time to refill, and to remember that it's a full embodied refilling. It's not just let's come and take classes and get more knowledge. It's not just let's make sure we're going to, you know, the protests and then doing those things again, which all of these are wonderful and necessary. It's also thinking about those spaces where, you know what, maybe I don't need to watch the debate today because I need to care for myself. It's also realizing those moments where we need to care for ourselves. You know, Audre Lorde talks about, you know, it's not an act of self-indulgence, it's an act of self-preservation, especially for many of those that are in minoritized communities, right? Like realizing that we're already doing extra labor emotionally, physically, mentally. And what does it mean that sometimes, as my friend would say, we need to conserve our vibranium, you know, Black Panther term there, but sometimes we have to protect it. And we have to say, is this worth the energy right now? And what are the long-term things that we're trying to reach for? You know, Senator talked about how he, you know, had his body on the line. If we're doing that, we have to be in a place where we can physically be able to do those things, which means caring for ourselves, caring for our bodies, having good modeling habits within our communities. We often practice grace and compassion with others. Why not practice it with ourselves and say that, you know, some days if this is the one thing I accomplished, that's okay, and that's enough, and that we don't have to continue to move on. And what does it mean to, while we're reimagining this community, I'm loving this phrase, Senator, thank you. While we're reimagining this community, I'm wondering, can we also redefine productivity while we're there? Can we also define what it means to be productive? I think it was Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III that said it in, I think his video that where he was talking to Howard grads when they graduated about how they produced during a pandemic. And again, a senator talked about this triple crises. And so, you know, you're not only trying to produce during a pandemic, during an economic crisis, during racial injustice, during, you know, all of these things. So maybe we need to redefine what productivity looks like and what can be realistic. And what does it mean to say, hey, I did this one thing. I care for my kids today, and that is enough. You know, my toddler had a temperature, I was there, and that's enough for today. And guess what? I will wake up and I will still be enough, and that's okay. And so I think, how do we take what Emily Towns would call this fantastic hegemonic imagination that tells us there's just one narrative of what we have to produce and what we have to do. And as the senator says, reimagine what it can look like when we do this work together, right? Because if it's just one of us trying to accomplish all of this, of course we're working 24-hour days. But when we call on our community, when we can say, hey, I'll take Mondays if you take Tuesdays, so that we can both have a day off, right? What does it mean to call on those that you're in community with to say, we can walk this together, and we don't have to leave in pieces, leave fragmented, which so many minoritized communities have to, but we can all leave this place whole, and we can get free together, right? In this reimagined community that could be so wonderful and beautiful. So how can we really live into that? And just realizing that part of that might also be boundaries. Just gonna throw that out there. Those are gonna be important, whether it's social media, whether it's folks, whether it's family. We might love them, and sometimes we also need to love them with boundaries, We're just going to name that too, but realizing what that might look like, realizing what that might mean to mobilize our privilege, realizing that what it might mean to say, hey, if this is my area, how can I use my privilege to help other minoritized communities? What does that mean? What does that look like? And to really be intentional and to be accountable to do the work. Make a plan, right? Make a plan, write it down, be accountable, have some accountability partners to help you in this amazing work that you're doing. You know, he wasn't laying there by himself. You know, this isn't just reimagining my own individual needs. He says reimagining community. And it's going to take us together to do this work together. So I am just excited about this and thinking about how we're doing this as whole people. And I just want to, if you don't mind, I just would love to throw a question back to you, Senator, because I know we said we want to make sure we leave more space for the conversation. So I would love to throw a question back at you. When we're thinking about reimagining community in the 21st century, you know, you said specifically so we can have safety, dignity, and justice, right? Like a space for that. And I'm going to say, if I have students on here, they're probably chuckling because they know when I hear the word safety, I kind of shudder. I've worked with several young people of color, and for them, they say to say the word safety feels like BS to them because they can never actually be guaranteed safety, and that I should never promise them something I can't give. But to be courageous, to have a space that is courageous and brave to do the work, to hold each other accountable. Personally, as the womanist, I would say a clearing space so that we can play and that we can do puzzles and we can dance and do all these other beautiful things and be our full selves. So I'm just curious, what is, you know, we're talking a little bit about like that. So but what would that look like for you if it is safety, and how would we even begin to try to live into that? I know that's a loaded question, sorry.
No, it's fine. I think, so I appreciate the question. I was ready to like throw questions at you, so this is fair. This is fair, you got in there first. I think the first thing is to understand that safety is an idea. The definition of safety has been defined by law enforcement and reactionary forces for decades, for generations. And so for any of us, I can put it on an ideological spectrum. Anybody who's left of center has sort of ceded what it means to defend safety, just like many people have ceded what it means to have freedom. But we have to understand that we're actually arguing over the idea and the public's imagination, understanding of that idea of having safety and freedom. And so if you ask anybody, would you like to be safe? I don't know anybody who says no. Nobody goes, I don't want safety. They may not like what they think safety means, but they do understand that safety means that you are protected or you got comfort. What we need to do is to expand on that safety isn't, you know, closed circuit television on every corner. It isn't the police roaming the streets and the segregation by blue lights. It's not the security state as we've been told, because if you go to a safe community, I'll give an example, Kenilworth in New Trier, one of the richest zip codes in the country. That is a safe community, not because of policing. Everyone's got a good school, they have great housing, they have great food, good wages, and economic power. There is a clear understanding of comfort that comes with that is safety. And that is something that everybody should have. That should be a right. And we don't need to operate from a space of scarcity because we're actually not poor. As a country, we are not poor. We have a lot of money. We are the richest country in the history of the world, right? Like, we are not poor, and we don't need to operate that way. So I think, to me, reimagining safety is taking over that word and saying we're going to own it and understand that this is something that everybody should have. And for me, real quick, to try to keep myself a little bit shorter, the best way to put this is you're 6 years old. You live in South Shore. Let's say it's Parkside Elementary School in South Shore of Chicago. You should be able to go from your home, because you have a home and a roof over your head, to school, get to school, have a good experience in school, good books and food and everything, leave school, come home because you have a home, and you don't have the interaction with the police officer who's just identifying you because you're Black or young or someone's trying to come after you or anything like that. You should be able to have all of that with comfort. Your parents should have a good job with a good wage and a union all put together. All of this needs to be a thing that is a guaranteed right. And when you go to your life to hang out with your friends, you feel comfortable outside. Like that should be a norm. That should be a norm in life. And if you just so happen to get caught up in the system, if the system has somehow grabbed you, that you aren't stuck and locked up forever and stuck in that system, that you are actually seen as a human that's invested in, and that you're not locked into this. I mean, the idea in America, we treat the idea that if you're incarcerated or anything that's quote unquote crime, it's like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. And yet after World War II, we helped rebuild Europe. If you look at, in terms of the Japanese occupation of South Korea and China, there was the idea of creating some reconciliation. If you look at South Africa, as we see as an example, there's some reconciliation. If you look at currently any place that does incarceration compared to us, they see it as an opportunity to invest in people and not simply lock you up and say that you are naturally some way, which is rooted in a very terrible sense of white supremacy and classism. So yeah, that's what I mean by safety in a very, yeah. So.
No, that's helpful. That's helpful. And, we're always wrestling again with terms and words and how we, and I love it because it's an idea, but it's about the reframing, right? And so I love this reimagine. Let's reimagine what that looks like, right? So, because I tend to push back and say, well, let's rename what we call a space, and maybe it stays safety, maybe it doesn't. But how do we make sure we're allowing the space to reimagine what it looks like, and not just use the narrative or what was constructed for us for it to mean for groups of people that it was never intended for, right? In the beginning. And so I actually really, really appreciate that kind of reimagining of what that can mean and what that can look like. I know you said you might have had some things you wanted to throw at me, so I want to say
yeah. So I have one. It's a big question. It's a big question. What in your life has drove you to do this work and to head down this path, and where does that come from?
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I feel like I was just so excited. I just started talking. No, but thank you. So it just came from places where, as a Black woman in this world, I was told that my body didn't matter. I was told that it was insignificant and it wasn't important. I literally had a white male professor who I was at this happened to be at a particular Ivy institution that I will remain nameless at this time. And I was there, and we were at this session, and it was like a week-long seminar or something that we got selected for. I was the only woman of color, and literally went around shaking everyone's hand and just telling them how great he was that they were there and how much they added. Came to me, literally patted me on the top of my head and said, "At least you're attractive." And it was the space of moments like that those aggressions, whether they're micro or macro, those moments where I said, that's BS. And that shouldn't happen. But in the moment, I was a little Black girl who said, I'm nothing, who said that this man can't even see past my body, who said that this man only sees X, Y, and Z. And so now I will never make it into the academy as I had hoped that, but thankfully I've had some amazing people, specifically women of color in my life, who told me, no, you matter, your voice matters, and your body is a part of that. And that's why it matters. It's because you'll be able to say things and know things that others won't. So that's where a lot of it comes from, is realizing we can't keep having those types of trauma, those types of acts of aggression that happen to people. We need to teach, again, I'm teaching here, right? So we need to teach those that are going to be carrying people a different way. We need to teach them that can be harmful, that we need to make space for all voices. In my particular class, we just talked about the danger of a single narrative, how we don't need to focus on monoculturalism, how we all have multiple faiths, multiple identities, and how we need to make space for all of it, because if not, it becomes really dangerous and things can happen to people. And so if we're reimagining community, that is also my hope, is that I'm reimagining what congregations and church communities will look like, that I'm reimagining how we begin to teach and live in community with one another and see, and how we even have conversation and care for one another. So I am with you. Let's reimagine, because, like you said, I feel like I really wrote it down. You said, situations and conditions that were disgusting. And I would describe exactly that, because again, that's one instance of probably, just off the top of my head, probably at least 4 or 5 more, right, that are always right here, that were just situations and conditions that were disgusting and that should not happen, and that need to be called out and held accountable, and realize that it can be different if we reimagine and we do the work to put in to build this community that we're reimagining. So I appreciate that.
Okay, so I might have some more questions, so you just gotta do it. And okay. We were told that we're not, especially if you're Black, especially if you're a Black woman, you're not allowed to be angry. But I think that's okay. Would you say that you are angry about, excuse my language, everybody, that shit that just that happened to you?
Yeah. First, thank you for saying shit. I appreciate that. Thank you. Was I angry about it? Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, at that moment, I wasn't allowed to be. And I wasn't allowed to be for double reasons. One, because I knew I'd be called the, again, if we're going to excuse the language, but this is actually how it's phrased, bitter Black bitch, right? That was the angry one, the one who has rage. That was what I would be labeled as. So in that moment, I had no words. I just said, okay. I left, I went to my room, and I literally cried and danced. Again, embodied person here. So that was really just in that moment, that was all I could do. And then later, I called my mom, and my mom, all of that. But it was a space of, because number one, I didn't want those around me to think I was weak. Because I couldn't afford that. I couldn't afford that space either. So I couldn't be angry. I couldn't appear weak. And I couldn't let them think less than. But then also, when I had the conversation with my family, it was like, absolutely, you have to work twice as hard. You have to work 3 times as hard. So it was also getting it from several sides and realizing that, where do I carve my space and narrative? That took me a long time to find my voice, especially when I was continuously told what it should be or what it was. So I think, I was actually been reading Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper, which is an amazing thing. And our anger and all of that is this beautiful way of communication in a full expression. Again, we're talking about wholeness. How do we have the wholeness of all of who we are? I can't help but think of the movie Inside Out. We're not whole until we have all of our emotions that happen, that are in play, that allow and make space. And it shouldn't just be one way just because that's the way that you've seen us in the world. And so, yeah, I do get angry. There are going to be times where I do get upset. And now that I have words, and now that I have the confidence behind me to say that, I can say, yeah, I'm pissed. And guess what? You're going to be okay. Or, today I'm going to keep my screen off, and I'm going to wear my t-shirt or something that says, you get in good trouble, or a t-shirt that says, I hope we arrest the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor. And I'm going to wear that as my act of resistance. And you're going to sit there and you're going to take that. And that's going to be okay. And I just realized I have to make spaces to resist, to let even my joy be resistance. Let my anger be resistance. Let my play be resistance. And so I'm just thankful, and I'm hoping that we can make more space in this reimagined community that we're creating. So I think what we're creating here is like this amazing community that I really want to happen now.
So that's why I have one more question, because with all of this that you've taken away, let's say it's next 5 to 10 years. And I think there's a lot of reasons for why, and I've been struggling with this. I've been depressed the last few days because the president has been so painful. I think from like joyous memes on Friday and like people shit posting to, oh my God, this dude's going to be even worse of a fascist. But let's be a little hopeful. 5 to 10 years from now, from your own place, what you envision in the world, what do you hope to see in the world? What moves you from any place of pessimism or doubt and gives you hope that you feel like we can build, and not only that, not do it where it feels like it's all on your shoulders to have to do, but do it in a more collective manner?
Thank you. Oh, that's an amazing question. So I will say the first thing, so I have a toddler who is 17 months. And so this becomes very real because I want a better world for him, right? So that's off top. I'm willing to do whatever work I need to do so that he's not terrified when he walks down the street, so that I don't have to be fearful if he's going to come home, right? Him or my Black spouse right now. Even now, I'm like, it's 9 o'clock. Where are you going? You're going to the store? Okay, check in when you get to the store. Text me, when you get to the car, and then when you get home, right? And so I want more. And so what I've been doing is we have these amazing communities here. I mean, folks here at CTS, I have, folks at the Forum for Theological Exploration, or people that I've connected with. And I've come to this place where I realize that we are all pieces of a much larger puzzle that I like to call the kingdom, right? And if I'm able to be the puzzle that I've been called to be, and I'm faithful in saying, I'm going to be my puzzle piece. I'm going to do the work that I know I'm called to do, which is to teach, to get people to question, to wake up to critical consciousness, to realize that we can do better, to be better, to see our places of privilege, to see places where we are oppressed and to push back, and to have those difficult conversations, to sit and wrestle in the tension. And if I can do my piece, even though it gets hard sometimes, and even though I'm passionate about it and I can do this piece, then I also need to give you the space to do your piece, because I need you to do your piece, because I don't know that much about politics. I can't do your piece and I can't be your piece. And if I tried, it would be a hot mess. So I have to also have faith to say that you're going to be the piece that you need to be, and I can be the piece that I need to be. And then we can kind of form this puzzle together through community, through working together. That way I can have conversations with you. We can cross talk that way. Hey, this other piece goes here. Let's go find this person. I know this person, and this person can be this. This person has a passion for this. Let's bring them in. Let's bring these voices that aren't heard. This artist actually has this poem that's amazing. Let's bring them in. And realizing that it's going to take all of us bringing each other in, saying each other's names, cheering each other on, being intentional, but also holding us accountable to do the work. Because sometimes, it's going to get tough. But it's like bringing those things together and having those difficult conversations. And for me, that's what I feel like a lot of how I'm trying to bring this about is what I've been doing is being my piece, supporting other people to be their piece, and also letting them be their piece and not trying to do their work.
Here's the thing then. Last question, and then I'm done. So, because I think there's a point you made, and maybe I'm doing this in some weird Socratic method. Dr. Lockhart, would you like to be powerful in the world?
I like to be powerful? That's interesting. I don't know if I would use the word powerful. I feel like some people might. I don't know if I want to use the word powerful. I'm trying to think, what was it? I want to be expansive. I want to be just beyond the boundaries that have been put around me. So I don't know if I see that as power. I just see that as crossing. I see that as realizing that I can push myself even past some of my own limits. But if I'm going to be expansive, I'm giving other people like the ability to be just as expansive, to take up their own space, right? Sorry, Lovecraft Country just got in my head. Take up space, not be small, not shrink. So I don't even know if I'm asking for power. I don't even know if I desire power. I just want to stand firm in my not shrinking and my beautiful expansiveness. And I think I'm okay with that. Would you say you want to be powerful?
Yes, I think that the thing that you're saying is that you definitely want power, because the only way you can be expansive is by having some control over space. And therefore, you have to have some power to control space. And I will say, we are told all the time that we are not allowed to be powerful. And there's this famous saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But the person who used that was very powerful, telling other people who aren't powerful not to have power, which is an interesting thing, that a powerful person telling other people not to have power. And I would say that what I would want, and seeing what you want in the world, and seeing what I'm sure so many people up here, want, is we want to have the power to control our life better, that we can make decisions free from the restraint from certain systems and structures. And so this is why I knew I asked this question. It's like one of those, I should never done it that way. Like, you're not supposed to do that. But my thinking is you deserve to have power. Everybody deserves to have power. And just like what you were saying, to share in that power and fit ourselves into this puzzle in the way that we work best, and not have to change and conform to fit that puzzle. So my thinking is I want you to be powerful.
Well, thank you. But how about in our reimagined community, we just make up a whole new word for it and call it expansive? That would be my dream.
Let's get a lot more people to buy into that, and then we can get there. Right now, I got to operate from the fact that people are so tied to certain words. We got to move them along, and we can't expect people to be with us, but we got to help bring them with us. So I'm with you on that, and I'm down to bring people with us, but we got to remember that most people, they have one view of safety, they have one view of community, they have one view of individualism, they have one view about power, because that one view has been in this larger structure for so long. So I am down with you on on transitioning our world to something different, with new definitions and new words and new feelings that fit us all. So
I'm excited. We're going to do it. I'm now officially going to start using expansive more often, just so you know. And I'm really curious because I feel like we have been talking and I've enjoyed this conversation so much. So thank you for engaging. And oh goodness, I'm already getting like all the feels, you know, from it. But also I feel like we can't be doing all the work here, Senator Peters. I really want to know, those of you, you know, I'm looking at a little bit of the chat. I'm really curious what folks think that they can do when we're working on this reimagined community. You know, what are you all thinking? Does it feel expansive? Do you want to feel powerful and take up space? Or, I mean, do you want to throw another question out there for him? I want to know, I want to see some things in the chat about what we can actually do to help reimagine our community, right? Everybody's in a different context, in a different place, in a different situation. If you had to think of just one thing that you could do to reimagine your own community and what is there and what is possible, I am curious what that one thing would be. And maybe that's a lot for this, I don't know, but I still want to hold people accountable. The professor in me wants to hold people accountable to this.
I'm down. Let me tell you, this is, you're leading on this, and I am here to be like, I'm with you, wherever you're going. You know what I mean? I'm down.
I appreciate that. So some people are saying, get to know your neighbors. You'd be surprised. I've lived in some places and I didn't know my neighbor.
I don't know my neighbors. I honestly, though, to be very honest with everybody on this call, there are certain times where I'm like, I have to talk to people so much that this is the one instance where I have to be so rooted to the community where not knowing my neighbors isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I got once yelled at going into the elevator at 10 o'clock, wearing a hoodie and shorts, and I'm going to admit this, I smoked cigarettes, and I was just stressed, and I came back from smoking a cigarette with my headphones on, and a neighbor of mine said, you know, you're going to lose because you don't say hi. And I was like, I have laundry I have to do later. It's 10 o'clock. I mean, I'm sorry. Exactly. I'm sorry. But I do think if I wasn't in this role, for me personally, it's because of neighbors that when my mom was having some really tough mental health stuff, I didn't go home. I would go, I have family friends named the Shuftons, and they just had their door open, and I would sleep over because I couldn't be at home. And getting to know your neighbors is one way of helping us build that community where you don't have to, you can take a village to raise kids for real, like to raise a family, and to see that person as an uncle or an aunt or a cousin. So I think that the fact that that's reduced in the last 15, 20 years has just been painful. So.
Absolutely. Oh, the power of community. And I want to add one more thing to our reimagined community. You mentioned that when you were out there and you were smoking and the guy tried to call you out because you don't say hi, because, you know, of course we have to be friendly, right, and approachable. And so in our new community, can we be unapologetically who we are and not have to apologize? Like, I don't owe you, and I'm sorry for literally living my life and being myself, because it is wonderful and amazing, and I'm going to take up this space. So I also want that for our reimagined community.
That sounds great, but I don't want to be on video and recorded being like, yeah, I just want to be able to like, just, you know, fuck it, you know. Like, no, we don't need that.
And yet,
I want everyone who could watch this. Yeah.
If you wanted to,
I would love for other people to have that, but me as a state senator want to know that I am always the nicest person ever, and I love everybody. And please reelect me. No, but I'll let you say what I may think.
There you go. I will. Oh gosh, what is it? Key and Peele, where they have the interpreter. Luther. I will be. Can I? If when you get the, can I please be your interpreter to actually say this is what he really just said? I would love that. There we go. I'm Luther. Yes, Luther.
Luther. Yeah.
So I would have to, of course, find a new name. Well, Lakisha also starts with an L, but you know, we'll razzle it up a little bit. It works. You know, we're ready. I think we had some questions in the chat, I think, or if there's something else you wanted to throw out.
There was a question here by Jose Francisco. What role might religion or religious community play in reimagining community? What unique gifts, tools, practices, rituals does religion offering in this reimagining? I'll let you go first because I talk too much. So I'm going to let you go. Yep.
No, not at all, but feel free to jump in. So first I want to say this is Dr. Jose Francisco Morales, who is also a colleague here at CTS. So thank you for the question. I appreciate that. And I think you know, religious communities and religion, I think, plays a very large role. And it's really interesting because I was actually doing some reading a little while ago, and Olivia Pearl Stokes, who was actually the first Black woman to get a doctorate in religious education in the 1950s, I believe. Don't hold me to that. She actually talked about how at that time, the Black church did three things. It was the center of social life, it was the center of the movement for freedom and civic activity, and it was a spiritual center. So it's one of those things where maybe we're not doing all of those things, maybe we should be doing all of those things, but I think that religious communities tend to hold the kind of weight, sometimes for the good and for sometimes, you know, the weight of saying, hey, we can call people to higher standards. We can have a prophetic imagination. We can say we can choose to do better, and we can encourage people, and we can do practices and rituals. We can have, you know, even now if we're thinking about things that are happening, what does it mean to make your church a voting poll? What does it mean to look into what it takes to make that happen? What would it mean to say, we are going to ritualize this? And every time, you know, we have a person that is Black or brown and they lose their lives, we're going to go outside and do a lamenting ritual together where we say their name, we post their picture, and we put it up around. Like, what does it mean to say that you can be just as active and have various practices and tools in place? What does it mean to say that you can also make space for how we need to resist with joy, and bring me to teach some Zumba and we can dance in the streets together? What does it mean to say we can do so much? I just think it means, if we're reimagining, I think we also have to reimagine what our creativity can look like, to realize it's going to take all of our creativity to reimagine and say, this doesn't even have to look like, we don't even have to be inside the four walls. We can be in nature and take a hike and experience the divine in a whole new way. We can be creating and have a meal and experience. And so I just think we're just going to have to, I'm going to use my word, be expansive and know that it's possible. So
That's
hopefully
good.
that answered your question, Dr. Morales.
Yeah, I mean, I would say short, because not as good as that. I would say, you know, the one thing that I feel like when it comes to religion and religious community is it's one of the few places which are a designated community. It's one of the few places where you come together as a community with specific expectations as a community. And that I feel like over the last 15, 20 years, a certain set of liberal thinkers have deemed religion as bad in such a way that has been destructive. And instead of having this sort of sense of a collective sense of self with religion, there are people who, because we don't actually have those spaces, we don't have religious community, that are actually now more open to a different type of community that is very destructive. I mean, I think about, for example, QAnon meeting up with anti-vaxxers. It's because people are going to seek out community, and you can't just get rid of it, which I think has existed. And I think that was part of an attack on the idea of religion, people are now seeking out in a very destructive place where we could have actually seen, if we're talking about reimagining community and reimagining public safety, we can actually just reimagine the role of the church or our religious institutions within political life. And I don't mean political as in like electoral, but sort of political economy. And it has existed in this way in various forms throughout time, but it got marked by this sort of more liberal set of people in a way that was destructive. And I think that what we're seeing now, for example, right here, but across the board, is that there are people who are more open to the world than ever before, who also see their religious community as a key and vital piece of that, and are rejecting the notion of this sort of liberal, scientific, or to get real nerdy on it, an Austrian positivist science bullshit, and they're seeing that we need this space. And so I think that this is actually an important fundamental piece for us to reimagine community, and not something where we need people who reject it. I mean, we see too many people, particularly, you know, and especially I would say Democratic Party, but that type of personality, who just say, oh, church and religion is just so bad and evil. I don't know what you're talking about. Your yoga program that you think is completely divorced from any religious practice is is going to form in whatever way it may form, because people need community and they need it together, and let's have it be guided and rooted in sort of justice, and that can apply to anyone and anywhere, and we shouldn't condemn something. So I think this, yes, I think it's important. So that was me ranting. I'll let you go. You go, Dr. Lockhart. I'll get too philosophical. It's too much. So.
No. Hey, I'm here with you. I'm just also realizing our time. So I just want to check in with Lisa to see if like there are other questions we need to answer. You know, I want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, because I feel like, Senator, you and I, we're here, so we can just talk.
I feel like this dialogue could definitely go on, and I actually would love for it to go on. I think people are very much enjoying it, and I want to thank both of you so much for your comments and your provocative thoughts, and the idea of reimagining what we're talking about as community. So many great takeaways, but we do need to turn to some time for community announcements. So President Ray, I'll